Hello everyone, it is Toby from Toby's urbansketch. Today we're doing a ink drawing of this scene up here. We're going to have a think about how we can add this figure and this chap in the middle in a sort of dynamic and interesting way, but using just ink, just a fountain pen. So let's just get going for it, and I'd love to see in the comments what you think of this. Do you think this is an interesting technique? Do you think it's too boring without watercolour? Have you given it a go? Let me know. So let's start with this sort of fun building, the one in the front. This is a photo from Cambridge, by the way, which is a lovely city very near where I live. So not very often actually, but occasionally we go there, often to meet friends or something. And of course, if the weather's lovely like this, it's great to take a lot of photos to come back and sketch from. And of course, love to share these photos with you guys. So here you go. What I'm doing is just capturing these big shapes. And as we come across here with our little awnings, or quite large awnings, I'm going to leave a gap for our chappie, sort of figure in our landscape. And we'll just have to concentrate a little bit. We're going to cut out lots of these people in the background, but we're going to concentrate just a little bit again as we come towards our chap, just leaving this nice gap, which lets us sort of be flexible with how we add in our portrait figure, our human, towards the end. And then we can move away and we can sort of safely sketch along and add these details like the roofs. So I like sketching the sort of horizontals and then what I sort of call strong verticals, things which join up the image, make it make sense. Especially with ink, it's nice to get in some of these contrasting lines. So where you've got the fortune of having a little bit of greenery in your scene, get in some random lines, some little really sketchy lines to break up those otherwise very architectural feeling lines. Have an experiment with how you like drawing them, because sometimes actually it can be fun to draw trees in a much more architectural way, make everything feel very man-made. So lots of options as ever to suit all people, all styles, and pretty much all moods. Right, so almost worked my way across. And this is what I mean by sort of just building up these verticals, going from horizontal lines until I find these strong verticals, working along those. That's the way my brain seems to find it easiest when you've got lots of complex things going on. And I've made this this structure on the right a little bit too tall, but it's fine. We just sort of keep going. It just becomes a bigger building, doesn't it? Got lots of chimneys going on. I might leave it at just the 3 chimneys. Give me space to get in some of these other details. I'm not going to sketch this whole building. What I actually want is to really just have it at a really deep point of contrast, offsetting this kind of focal area. Just going to sort of get some of these window shapes in while I'm over here. And again, just really crude versions of a window. Maybe we start to get some of these figures in here, and we can do this really easily. Circle, select circle, triangle, sort of upside down triangle. We can give them a bit of dynamism by bending the triangle over, for example. And then I think I might just imply the building with these vertical lines, but leave the rest of that to one's own imagination. We can add in a couple of these little details. We've got this chalkboard here. Of course it's not a chalkboard, it's an A board or something, but sort of like a classic chalkboard, isn't it? You can pop that in, gives us context of this sort of busy street. Get this little pavement coming around, it's got lovely flow in it, really shapes the whole image. And we can bring this pavement in, even though you can't see it, it kind of situates these people next to this church. And then I think the last stuff to get in, last big shapes, big objects to get in, probably just a couple of these roof lines up here. And again, these, do you see why these verticals are so important? As soon as you draw that, suddenly it's quite evident what you've got. One horizontal joined by a vertical, and you've got a house really. Same here. We just leave our shapes there. So let's just start mapping in this person. And it's not going to be a detailed figure. It's more about a figure in the context of this busy street. So we just get, again, focus on those big shapes. The ear is very prominent. They're wearing a mask, but we'll just give them a nose. Pretend we can see more, and just a little suggestion of an eye. I think I'm going to add the rucksack. I love details like rucksacks. I think they're quite easy to draw. Actually, they're a box, and we can all, if we think about it a little bit, we can just draw boxes. And B, because they're very recognisable, they immediately contextualise a person. And then we've got a sort of hand coming up here. And we can do hands with just simple shapes as well. So you see this triangle very much suggests the hand. It's just a hand in a sort of fist shape like this. And then just bring the legs down. And there we go. So we've got our person mapped in. And now it's about how we're going to build the scene a little bit more around them. So I'm going to start by just going back to our house. And we might not really touch that person much at all again. We might focus an awful lot on how we build the scene around them. We might add a few bits. I don't tend to pre-plan these sketching videos much. I think it's more interesting for me and hopefully more spontaneous for you guys if I tackle things as they come. So I had the idea of, I like the idea of sketching this person, but I haven't really planned it too much beyond that, and then we'll see what happens. So I'm going to get the shape of these windows in. I'm just popping in the dominant frame, the frame that I can see more of because of the perspective. Same here, we'll do this sort of dominant frame. And there's a lot more shape going on above these awnings. So just by repeating some of these horizontal lines, we can suggest that quite nicely. We've also got quite a fun road sign here actually, so I'm going to get that in now before I forget about it. And there we go. And then we can start adding some shape to the front of these awnings. And this is where we're going to start thinking about how we're bringing tone and shape to this whole scene. And that's how we're going to start making this chappie stand out. So there's the rest of our pavement. Now I'm going to start over here because it's really obvious. This building's in shadow. So we're going to just bring down lots of just simple, fairly messy, vertical sort of lines. And we're going to try and leave out our people so that our people are sort of punching out from within this shadowed building. And we just build them up. And they're nice and rough. Remember, this building's all really just a suggestion of a building. Then we can go back here and we can find the areas of this building which are also in shadow. And we can add those bits of shadow in. And you see how this sort of, here we've started to negatively sketch. So we're often talking about negative painting. Here we're negatively sketching lots of our building, lots of these shapes. We can go back and add a bit more hatching and suddenly we've got windows. But the shapes are emerging from this vertical tone. We can do a bit more in a few places again. Then we can leave areas nice and white, nice and clear. And it's the same thing, it's a sort of negatively sketching the light. The light emerges by the virtue of the depth elsewhere. We've got some interesting things. If you, with the eye of faith, you can see a building sort of creeping in just to the right of this one. So we could add that in. And by doing that, we also can start to negatively sketch this building. So we can bring this line all the way down, and suddenly we've got a lot of shape to this building without adding any real shape to it, if that makes sense. If that total nonsense can make sense. But that is trying to describe negative sketching, I think. Now I'm going to turn my pen round, because if you look either side of this, if we ignore the people in the background, underneath this awning is really, really dark. And this is where we get the opportunity to make this chap really pop out. And so we just get these same vertical lines, but using the thick side of our pen, the sort of really dark side, not the thin is the back and thick is the front of the nib. And we can just start to build up these lines. And then there's also shadow being cast by these awnings. So again, this shadow comes to our chap. It also comes all the way around here. And it's also in our A-frame. And we're sort of having to do a little bit of exaggerating some of these shadows. And I have, of course, done the shadow from the A-frame the wrong way, so we'll just spread the shadow. The light is sort of coming down like this, so the shadows should be going more sort of over here. But never mind. And then we can do the same from this building. And suddenly we've got this sort of light and dark disappearing off into the back of this street. And again, if we make this greenery alternating light and dark, we can negatively paint this awning. And let's just do a little bit more of that, really add some depth. And then we can start to add a couple of little suggestions of detail just by introducing some other lines into all that depth of tone. Okay, do you see how this man is sort of lifting up now, lifting from the page? And we can add a bit of depth within him, a little bit of shadow. Not too much. But do you see how all his light bits now are surrounded by shadow? And then where there's light on the pavement, suddenly he's become shadowed. And so he's always really contrasted from the background. And it's sort of inventing some of these shadows, but some of them we're not. Some of them are very much real, they're very much there. We can do that within him as well, so we can just give some more shape to his head and under here, under the chin into the neck, by adding a little bit of shadow. And suddenly, without really touching the outline, he's become really crisp, he's lifted up. So I'm now happy with that. Was sort of aim number one. And now what we can start to do is just build up a little bit more detail in the rest of the image. Just a little bit. So, for example, in the windows we can start suggesting some textures, we can suggest some of these frames. Try not to detract from this kind of high contrast, interesting area though. So maybe even want to just double down on some of our line work here and some of our hatching, just to invigorate this area before we start building up again elsewhere. And we can do a similar thing on these awnings, so where they sort of bend in the middle, we can bring some shadow down, and that's again outlining our chap. Again, just providing contrast. And sometimes we're inventing this, like I said, sometimes we are just going, how can we invigorate our image? And sometimes it's very real, and sometimes it's taken directly from the reference. We've got some other fun windows here, and this is where we can get loose. So they've got shutters, very unusually for anywhere in this country. but we can create those shutters with this really loose sketching style. And then we can give the front of the building a little door and perhaps a big window. And the window can have just a little bit of our vertical line, a little bit of shadow. And there we go. So that is about a 15-minute ink-only sketch. There's always something else to add. I want to just add something there. It looked a little bit blank. So I thought let's just add a couple of little touches in the background. Anyway, that is now a 15-minute and a few seconds ink-only sketch. But despite that, there's a lot of shape, a lot of interest. This man is sort of popping. We've got these other little figures here adding a lot of busyness. And just loads of tonal contrast. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this kind of sketching. Is ink-only sketching interesting enough? Or is it a bit too dull?